So my name is Dypiangco. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and so I've been working as a therapist with survivors of domestic violence for many years. My partner, Rachel Fazio, who's also a therapist, we came up with the idea talking about how, in agencies, we both worked in domestic violence agencies, and there's just like this feeling of you only have to look back and pick up the pieces, and it can be very dark and it can be really hard. And most women want to look towards a bright future, right? Like that's why they left. They didn't leave so that they could keep looking to the past. They want to move on. So if somebody has a pattern of continuing to date jerks, then, it's like, hey, what's going on? Let's figure out what's going on so we can change that. So you can end up with someone nice, someone who treats you well.
Being a survivor myself, that is profound. It is profound what you guys are doing, because I recall being in counseling and being in group counseling, being in individual counseling, whichever. And truly all we did really focus on is healing what happened, which is absolutely important, but it makes it almost impossible to envision survivorship and beyond.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I never considered, I knew what thriving was back in the back of my mind, but I never considered what that would look like, feel like, walk like, talk like, until I met someone who lived that and talked about it. So what you guys are doing is amazing and incredible. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I think one of the things that happens with survivors is because the bright future and the dating future is never brought up, there's a shame. Brene Brown talks about silence breeds shame. And so anything we feel like we can't talk about turns shameful. And it shouldn't be a shameful thing. Mm-hmm. Like just because you were in a domestic violence or abusive or toxic relationship in the past doesn't mean that should dictate your future. Like that's completely unjust. That's so normal, very, very normal. And that is absolutely where, trauma therapy can come in really handy, as well as you working on your relationship with yourself and learning some coping skills. And we're working on a workbook for women around healthy sex and intimacy. And that has just like reframing it and how we look at it, as well as some coping skills for how do you manage flashbacks in the moment, or how to stay in your body, how to stay with the person that you're with. So what we want Resilient Rebound to be, right, is just a place where we can talk about anything. Sex, masturbation, flashbacks, all the things that are otherwise taboo.
And I continue to have the same daydream about it, and I find in the daydream I find myself freezing. When I'm with this person, I'm just like
a future positive daydream.
Yeah, a future positive daydream, and I'm with this person, and we're in an intimate situation, and I just freeze. I'm just like I can't. And I don't know that I would really be that way in real life, but every time I have the same daydream about it, and it's frustrating, and it concerns me that if I ever get to that point with this person, that's going to happen.
And so if you can create an alternate ending in your brain while you're daydreaming, then you are going to absolutely experience more success with it in the future. Like it is a very normal thing. Women freeze up, survivors freeze up during those moments. Like that happens, and possibly that would happen. It's okay. And right now you are trying to figure out what is something I could do in that moment so that I could, that I won't freeze, right? Yeah. And staying in your body. Grounding yourself is a big one, right? Where you're using all of your senses to be in this present moment. Well, you get to practice. This is what I love. You get to practice the coping skill in your daydream, and those neurons are starting to fire together and wire together.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because as you're describing this to me, I'm imagining myself in this situation, and like I'm seeing myself touch certain things. Like the first thing I touched was him, so I don't know if that would help. But I touched him, and I touched my hair, and I did a lot of deep breathing, and I seemed to be okay. So I'll continue to do that as I'm daydreaming about it more. Okay.
I love that you daydream. I think it's so important, you know, because it's the antithesis to the intrusive negative thoughts and the flashbacks.
How about the red flags?
The red flags.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the two big ones that I always try to hit home, right? And I think that education about this should start before dating even happens, right? With our children. And like every person should know this, but the two main red flags are, do they take responsibility for their actions? And do they have empathy? So those are the big ones, because if they don't, then you got to get out. Like, it is not going to go anyplace good. And other red flags are people who have a strong adherence to gender roles. That can be a red flag. So anytime you feel like you can't share to your family or to your friends fully about anything that happened between the two of you because you don't want them to get the wrong idea, that's a red flag, right? Likewise, anytime like they're very kind of secretive or mysterious about their past, their ex is crazy, all of their exes are crazy. It's hard when you're in the moment. It's easier as a therapist, right? Like looking in. And I'll say, like, I was in an abusive relationship when I was 15. And then I got trained in domestic violence when I was 22. And so I've had the privilege of that, being 22 and having that training helped a ton. But I know just that, like, it's so sneaky. Right? Because a lot of times they speak so confidently, and women are trained like, oh, if someone speaks confidently, they must be right.
A point that I make a lot when I talk to other survivors is that a domestic violence relationship really puts you into the fact and living the fact that love is blind. I totally know exactly what that looks like, walks like, and talks like, and lives and breathes in real life now. And when you first meet this person who is charismatic and like you said, speaks confidently and dresses well and is very professional and just carries himself very well, they learn how to mask these quote unquote red flags in a way that you just don't see.
Yes. Yeah. Because they're successful. So I should trust them. So typically what I see with survivors in dating is they take one of two routes. And one of those is, I'm never going to date again. And then the other one is, get me on Bumble and Tinder right now. And so I think it has to do, you know, sometimes people just have a hard time being alone, you know, and that goes back to, what is my relationship with myself? There are many women who just have never been single. As an outsider, would I want to say, hey, maybe you should be single for a while before you start dating? Yes. But also, if you're going to date anyway, then, you know, how can we help you do that in a way that's safe? In a way that's supported.
Yeah.
It's like reducing the harm that could be caused. But even if you're in a relationship, I think it's really important to spend time with yourself.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I'm the former. So I was married once, and I really don't see it happening again. But of course, God has different plans. Then the outcome will be different. But I have no problem being single. I enjoy being single, actually, especially now being a parent. I don't know how in the world I would manage a relationship. I mean, because you have to take the good with the bad, and it's a lot. I want to make sure that I heal first, take that time to heal first, and then jump into something so that it can be as healthy as possible. So does that other end of the spectrum, does that also go back to self?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think the other thing is, as a mother, you have to be very careful about who you bring into your child's life.
Mm-hmm. What should a survivor definitely heal from prior to dating?
Mm-hmm. One thing that comes up automatically for me. So we talked about, sexual trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, I'm a big advocate for people doing EMDR therapy because I think it's very, very helpful. But another thing, in addition to sexual trauma and healthy intimacy, is a fear of abandonment and any abandonment issues that come up, because I think sometimes that can be why women stay, and it can be why women end up getting into another relationship really quickly. So it goes back to having a community and a support system so that you can be alone.
Okay.
And, I guess you are alone but supported. Like, you're alone but not lonely. You're single, and you have a broad network of people who you can reach out to.
It's like how people talk about having those roots. Like if you're a tree and you have the branches and you have the leaves, in fall the leaves fall off and the skinny branches, they break and fall off. But the roots, those 5 or 6 roots that you have, they'll always be there. So no matter what goes on up here, you always have that support source that'll be there for you day to day, no matter what the season is. What is codependency?
Oh, I hate this question.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
No, it's a wonderful question. It's just really hard to define. Like, if you read the book, there's a couple books. Pia Mellody and Melody Beattie both wrote kind of like the Bibles of codependency. When I think of codependency, what I think of is I am going to try to control you so that, because my feelings depend on what you're feeling. So I need you to be happy so I can be happy. So I'm gonna make your environment, walk on eggshells around you, make your environment really nice and safe and all these things so that I can feel safe. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I am not codependent. Great. Now, because I'm like, what does that mean? No matter what I've read, whatever their definition might have been, it was not clear. I didn't understand it.
It is not. I agree. When I think of survivors and codependency, that's what I think. And then there's the other side, right, of like the alcoholic, where typically when we think of codependency, it comes out of alcoholic relationships or relationships with addiction. Mm-hmm. And so the person who is with the addiction is also identified as codependent with the person, and they're in this kind of dance together. EMDR therapy, they're both psychosensory modalities, which mean that they are addressing not just the cognitive part of the brain, but they are helping trauma be released through the body, because we do hold trauma at a cellular level, as we talked about the other day. And so with EMDR, there is a process where we identify a target image, and then there's a series of questions that are asked, and those questions are designed to get somebody feeling as upset as possible. And then they start with bilateral stimulation, and through the bilateral stimulation, it helps kind of the left and right hemispheres of the brain connect, and it just helps jumpstart the conversation in the head, where with trauma, what makes something traumatic is we have internalized a negative belief about ourselves because something has happened. So I'm not safe, it was my fault. that sort of thing. And then through EMDR, that negative belief becomes actually positive. I did the best I could. It wasn't my fault. I'm a good person. Whatever kind of the opposite of the negative is. And it's amazing because it happens automatically. And so what I love about it is it's not the therapist really doing much. It's really the person's own brain helping themselves come to their own inner wisdom and truth. And people's brains, survivors' brains do not lead them astray. It's a very powerful.
Oh, wow.
Very powerful thing. So what you would do is you would start with a lot of resourcing and a lot of relaxation and skill building in that way.
Okay.
Because absolutely right, dissociation is a real thing, and dissociation is when we leave the body mentally because it's not safe to be there. And it used to be at the time when it was developed, it was a coping skill because it wasn't safe to be in your body when you needed it or when you were developing the dissociation tendency. Our brain thinks it's protecting itself because it has been threatened before. And so it has developed these skills to keep us safe, but then ultimately it doesn't know how to it overgeneralizes.
Okay.
And so like right now you're safe, but you might still be having the feelings that you're in the past. If somebody's looking for an EMDR therapist, that, definitely find a therapist who is licensed or under the supervision of somebody who's licensed, who's trained through an accredited EMDRIA organization or trainer, and that like this is not at all something that somebody should do by themselves.
Yeah.
They really need to be in the hands of a qualified therapist. So havening is super new. So EMDR was developed in mid-90s. Havening was developed in like 2015 or 2014. It's so new. So there's not a lot of research on it. But I can tell you as a person and as a therapist, like I see the positive effects that havening can have, and they have to build their body of research to make it evidence-based. But havening addresses the amygdala. So the amygdala is the part of our brain that serves as like a radar for do I need to fight, flight, or freeze? And so going back to when a trauma happens, right, then our brain changes. And so there's something called a AMPA receptor on our amygdala that kind of sticks out and becomes more attuned to the environment and is more willing to send our brain into fight, flight, or freeze, or our bodies into fight, flight, or freeze if they sense anything even minutely is off. And that's, again, going into the overgeneralization. And so havening is a series of 4 touches on our body that helps increase the delta wave production. And so we can associate the happy, sleepy brain waves with the image or the stressor. And then the image and stressor becomes kind of what we call depotentiated, and no longer are we overreacting to things that are not threatening. It won't ever take away if you need to respond to something, if something is a threat, you will know. Yeah.
It takes away the inappropriate reaction, like the overreaction.
The overreaction, the hypervigilance.
These 2 therapies sound very effective. Sound like they would be very effective against PTSD.
Yeah. And yeah. I really like them. They help tap into a person's inner positive voice.
I'm very interested in the effects that domestic violence and domestic abuse has on the inner workings of the brain and how that manifests itself physically. So that type of pathway. And so when you're talking about the effects EMDR has and havening has on the amygdala, I can visually see the effects as you're telling me, and I'm just so fascinated. Thank you so.
Yeah, no, this has been great.
Excellent.
We talked about red flags. We talked about the dating blind spots. And I think, again, if people want to come to our quiz and, talk about find out what their dating blind spot is. We also have a blog that every week we release different information on various related topics. And a lot of them focus on coping skills because we do understand that like tangible things to do are so important. There's no right or wrong time to return to dating and healthy relationships. And it's really how are you feeling with yourself? And that's the message that I would want to send to every survivor, that if you're single or if you want to get back out there, right? Like, no matter where you are on that spectrum, just like the important things, and this is what our framework is built around with Resilient Rebound, is like education, right? So knowing the red flags, knowing your dating blind spots, what to look for, how to cope, all of those things, healthy communication, boundaries, codependency, all of that. Self-compassion is huge, and that needs to be a continuing practice in all of our lives. No matter what, even if you're, healthy married for 50 years, we still have to have strong practices of self-compassion and self-care. And then the last part of our framework is community and connection. But if any of your followers want to join us, and I know you're there, and it's really great, but we hope to create really safe, supportive conversations around things that are really hard to talk about.
Yeah. And that's the big difference, talking about it and bringing awareness to both yourself and the community. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything I can do to support.
Likewise.
Thank you.